Well, all the recent weather tragedies are a grim reminder of an awful event we saw unfold here in Austin 30 years ago tonight.
It became known simply as the Memorial Day flood, and it was one of Austin's darkest days.
It truly was, and it was about this time of night, exactly 30 years ago, that the rains started.
Businesses along North Lamar were among the hardest hit.
A KXAN report on Memorial Day 1981 detailed the losses from one of the most intense flash floods in Austin history. 11 inches of rain in 4 hours turned city creeks into raging rivers. But the $36 million in property losses could be restored. The 13 lives lost could not.
A railroad tie that probably had been used in someone's garden or for some landscaping hit us kind of full force.
30 years later, Jim Ferguson recalls that harrowing night on Shoal Creek, escaping his Jefferson Street home with his wife and 15-month-old son, and seconds to spare.
Turn aside and let the railroad tie kind of move on. A pickup truck was coming down the street, just bobbing up and down in the water. And had that hit us, it would have, there was no way we would have survived. We could hear people yelling, help. It was dark. We didn't know exactly what was happening.
Ferguson described neighbors who barely survived, some with small children floating on mattresses.
The mother and the father each had a son on their back. They came out and they were swept down the river. They were fortunate enough to catch hold of the roof on the house next door to ours. And their sons climbed off of their back onto the roofs, and then they climbed on the roof. Two of our neighbors were not so fortunate. They stayed in their house, and they both drowned.
Most of the dead were swept into Shoal Creek in their cars, off roads and bridges right in the middle of the city. It was a 100-year flood, but the water receded as quickly as it rose, and help came quickly.
But by the time we'd returned, already friends and neighbors were already down here.
And his family's close call gave them a new perspective.
What you have is not so important as the fact that you have others, and you have your family, and you have neighbors. As long as you have those things, life can continue on amidst the worst of disasters.
Jim, Ferguson's home was one of many that were purchased by the city and removed from the floodplain. There will be more flash floods on Shoal Creek, we know that, but hopefully the extensive flood control work that's been done by the city since 1981 will keep history from repeating itself. And by the way, the city has created a special website about the '81 flood, and they are encouraging those who remember it to share their stories. You'll find a link to the site and a slideshow from that day 30 years ago tonight on KXAN.com.
A lot of people remember that night, and we